So life can be complicated, right? And maybe for some of us today, life is altogether difficult. In one of his poems, Reverend Howard Thurman reminds us that God was born into our despair and born among the heartbroken and struggling. His poem goes like this. Christmas is waiting to be born where refugees seek deliverance that never comes. And the heart consumes itself if it were live, where little children age before their time and life wears down the edges of the mind, where the old man sits with mind grown cold while bones and sinew, blood and cell go slowly down to death, where fear companions each day's life and perfect love seems long delayed. Christmas is waiting to be born in you, in me, in all humankind. Because we so easily confuse optimism for hope, we don't allow ourselves to hope when we're going through tough times. But it was in the midst of the world's darkest days that hope was proclaimed and hope born anew. Much of our traditional Advent readings come from the Hebrew Scriptures. The lyrics found in Handel's Messiah rely heavily on words from the Psalms and the prophets like Micah and Isaiah. These words were written for the Hebrew people who had come to realize that their optimism did not protect them from calamity. Their country was conquered. Their people were taken from their homes and sent into exile. They had lost much of what they most deeply valued, and they were very certain that they would be refugees forever. The psalmist gave them hope of a royal son who will defend the poor and the oppressed and will bring peace and righteousness to a people who felt defeated. Isaiah describes a root from the family of Jesse, the family of David, that will rule fairly and usher in the age of peace. If there ever was a group of people going through tragedy, some of it was brought upon themselves, but these people were going through tragedy. These words were from Isaiah to encourage them to hold on to hope. It was in the midst of their despair, a people who felt like a flourishing tree that was cut down, that the Hebrew prophet wrote that a shoot shall come out from the stump, a branch from its roots. What a tangible picture of hope for them to hold on to. They felt like they were just a stump that had been cut down, and here's this picture of a shoot coming from what seems like a dead tree. For years, when our Christmas trees were live ones, I would include one lower branch when we would cut off that end of the tree. And then I would place this stump and what I would call a shoot in a spot where I could easily view it. It was my Jesse tree, a promise, not that everything would turn out fine, but a promise of ongoing life, a promise that God was with us. Altogether hope does not need good circumstances in order to be experienced. So how do we hold on to hope when it seems like we are being pulled every which way, when our life seems dark and murky? Perhaps we need to change our outlook on life. In our world that relies on formulas and statistics and systems and algorithms and calculated solutions, I think we have come to see that if we just do certain things in just a certain way, we will rise above the hardships in life. I once saw a poster that read, "Easy now, hard later. Hard now, easy later." Well, that's a nice sentiment if it were true. If we have come to presume that we have control over our day-to-day and that life is good, then hard times will come as a rude surprise. Psychologists have found that those who recognize and accept that life indeed is hard, or that life is difficult, will be less likely to make life harder for themselves. I just want to interject here. This morning I learned that my mother was taken to the hospital. And when I was talking to my husband, he said, "Well, Mary, she's over 90. So, yeah, she would be going to the hospital." So what I'm saying is, yes, it's very sad, but yes, it's part of life. And perhaps more importantly, that when we realize that our journey in life will at times be difficult, we are more inclined then to become compassionate with others, admitting that burdens that life brings can give us insight into the plight of our neighbor. We then come to understand that we will all go through tough times, and so we check on each other. We move from thinking only about my life to our neighbor's life, and then we become hope bringers for our coworker, our family member, a friend, even the stranger that we have just met. However, being a hope bringer, or holding the candle of hope that I like to say sometimes, is when we do this for others, it doesn't mean that we try to snap them out of it. Or we say, "Oh, it could be worse." Or "Don't fret, God has a plan for you." Or say that, everything will turn out for the best. Because quick fixes, it turns out, is an easy reflex response for us because they don't require much vulnerability on our part, much risk. To be a hope bringer will indeed require for us to be vulnerable, to be a listening presence. And so often when you are just listening, you may wonder, am I doing enough? And the answer to that is yes. The ability to sit with the mystery. Arthur Parker Palmer reminds us that mystery surrounds every deep experience of the human heart. He goes on to say that sitting with mystery will help us to be close to God. Our culture tells us to turn mystery into puzzles to be explained or problems to be solved. We feel more in control when we solve things. To be altogether a hope bringer, we will need to rest in the mystery of the now. And most likely, it will mean sitting within the darkness, even when we find ourselves uneasy. Mary, the mother of Jesus, no doubt heard Isaiah's words many times, that hope-filled prophecy of a changed world that was going to happen to her people. And yet even Mary, knowing that she was going to bear the hope bringer, needed hope herself. And she goes to her cousin Elizabeth, and there they are companions for one another, hope bringers for one another, showing up, going alongside each other. To be altogether hope bringers, we will need to show up for others, letting them know that we are on their side. Over the years, I have found that hope is indeed a form of grace from God. And in this waiting within the presence of God, waiting and looking for the dawn to come, I have found that glimpses of hope are all around me. They're in nature. So look for the way the sun sets on the top of the mountain, or enjoy how a cloud brings shade to just one little area of the mountain range, and the snow glistening on top of Mount Charleston as the sun rises. And grace, hope, the grace of hope comes from human beings. The laughter of children as they were playing with the balloon, a friend who calls, allowing family and friends to hold the candle of hope when you can't do so for yourself will help you eventually experience hope from within. Altogether hope. Being still rather than trying to figure out the whys in life will go a long way in providing hope. Perhaps because we will be less trying to figure out the reasons for the trouble that life is bringing and more of experiencing our Creator God's love for us. Our Creator God, the source of our hope. Amen.